Right, so here we go talking about the economy and basically investments and what we can do in these times. Well, joining us for that conversation, we have Boakye Danquah, government spokesperson on security and social, on security and governance, actually, governance and security. We also have Dr. Richmond Etiahene, a banking consultant, joining the conversation for now. Let me just say a very good morning to you, Dr. Etiahene. Thank you for joining the conversation. Hello, Doc. All right, we'll try to get the connection right with Dr. Etiahene. Boakye, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining the conversation.
Very good morning to you, Benjamin, and it's good to be here.
It's good to see you again. Your fugu is resplendent.
Thank you very much.
It looks very nice.
I'm preparing for Farmers Day on Friday.
All right. Dr. Etiahene, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you, sir.
A very good morning to you. Hope you're well.
Good morning, sir. Good morning to your cherished listeners and viewers.
Great. Now, you're a banking consultant. Let me start the conversation off from a bit of the economy before we get into some of those means we can use to keep body and soul together in these telling economic times. What do you make, though, of the recent budget statement that was presented in Parliament from the standpoint of
it looks a bit better, but it could have been the best.
Okay, so let me just conclude on this point. The budget in terms of the e-levy, VAT, leap, because we just saw, I don't know whether you were watching Joy News, some people depend on this for sustenance. What do you make of the budget from that angle?
Yeah, from the e-levy point, when they started implementing the e-levy, I told them that countries have practiced it and they have failed because the way they work their calculations, that if you do this, you get that. You know, in Latin, we say ceteris paribus, all things being equal. All things are not equal. So I started saying that, why don't you peg it at 0.75 to start with? And when it becomes acceptable, then you escalate it to say 1%. Then finally you get to. But here, nobody listens. When you say, they think, where other countries, about 4 countries in Africa, started the way we started, and they failed. So for me, from the e-levy point, the starting point was a bit of a failure because they did not listen to what other countries have done. So now that they are scaling it down to 1%, I don't know whether people will be prepared to do the transaction and pay the fee. So for me, it is like you had an opportunity, you miss it, now you want to come back to it. I don't know how it's going to work and how it's going to improve the revenue side of the budget.
Right. And so there are tricky bits to look at there as far as those components are concerned. But when you pick those two variables, the e-levy and VAT, e-levy being reduced by 0.5 percentage points, but with the threshold gone, and VAT being increased by 2.5%. I'd just like to find out from you, on a general scale, do you feel this will impact the poorest of the poor even worse? Taking into account that, as we've been told, over 14 million Ghanaians are multidimensionally poor. The World Bank tells us over 1 million plus Ghanaians have fallen into poverty, and the Ghana Statistical Service also reverberates saying, does it only worsen the plight of the poor and maybe the middle class in our country?
I did not hear your first statement. Can you please go over it? The line is a bit faint, please.
So I'm talking about the e-levy and VAT and the differences, so the variables when it comes to 2.5% more on VAT and the e-levy, though it has been reduced in percentage terms, the threshold being taken off. And I'm linking that to the 14 million plus multidimensionally poor in Ghana and what this could mean for the poorest of the poor.
With the increase in the VAT, I mean, the poorer is going to get poorer. It's going to get poorer because to push it to 20, from I think the current state of 17.5 to 20%, is going to make things very, very hard in the year 2023. things are not going to get better at all. And it's going to be tough for the average Ghanaian, especially with inflation trajectory looking a bit ahead. The inflation is not going to come down. So if you have inflation of about 40%, 40 to 40% at now, and it shoot up to about 54, it's not going to get better, because we should have looked at this and say that, do we want to protect the vulnerable and the poor? Unfortunately, we just slam it up and say, let us project it and get the revenue. For me, it's going to create a lot of hardship for the poor and the vulnerable in the society.
So in terms of what would alleviate the burden of the poor, I also know that many are going to essentially get to benefit from the LEAP program, for example. A positive step, right? What are the positives for you from the 2023?
Yeah, the positive side of the budget for me was some of the cost measures put in place. But I believe the cost measures should go further than what we have. Because you see, if you're going to do, the literature has proved that if you want to do a debt restructuring, especially domestic debt restructuring, you should always pay attention to your cost reduction. Because if your cost is very high and you do the debt, it goes contrary to the issues. So in other jurisdictions, what they do is that they ensure that the cost reduction is effective. Because why I say it's not effective is that everybody is talking about the numbers of the ministers, the numbers of this. We should subject ourselves to critique to find out that is it important to have so many things, while the economy, we are being supposed, the poor and the pension are supposed to tighten our belts. I mean, they should tighten their belts better. Other than that, the V8 monitoring and all these things is not going to be effective. The best thing as Armani did his work, and he said, we need to look at that. And when we do that, people will know, Ghanaians will know that we are serious in even intended debt restructuring. But as it is, it's just like a half-cake or a half-baked budget. So people will just say, but you're not cutting your budget, you are not cutting your expenses, you are just making some analysis and doing this. But we should be very effective. Austerity, when there is austerity, the austerity budget is about cost-cutting and effective expenditure control. Once you do that, Ghanaians will see that, look, let us all tighten our belts. And when we do that, maybe 2-3 years, which will be fine with us. But as it is now, I listen to the various measures he put in place. It looks good, but even the monitoring will be very tough for them.
Now, let's talk a bit about the banking sector and the role that you play in all of this. Some have said that in recent times, government has been crowding out the private sector, and that does not bode well for private enterprise and business generally. Did you find any signs of reprieve from that as far as the 2023 budget is concerned?
Thank you very much. You know, about 2 years ago, I made a presentation and I said the way we are borrowing, the way we were borrowing left and right, we were crowding out the private sector. And it's going to get worse. Because if policy rate has gone to 27 or thereabout, no bank is going to give you a credit less than the policy rate. They have to put their margins on it, the risk premium. So we're talking about maybe 38 or 30 something. And it's not going to help the industry. And if industry are not producing, the output is not good, then domestic revenue generation will be difficult. You know, it moves in tandem. If you look at one side of the equation and you don't mix the other side, you're not going to get it. And more importantly, if you listen to the governor yesterday, it looks like the debt restructuring is going to come. And if it's going to come, it is even going to curtail the bank's ability to give money to people. Because if you have whatever you use, whether it's a haircut, whether it's a debt restructuring, whether it's a debt swap, whether it's a debt profile, at the end of it all, there is cost in it. And the cost will be borne by those bondholders. And if the bondholders are going to face problems without not getting all their money, it is going to, next 2023, I'm telling you, you can say it and quote me. If what I heard yesterday is right, and the debt actually now being confirmed, they will do it, the life is going to be very, 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 very tough. I am not exaggerating because I have figures. I have figures to what I'm saying. Whether you apply the haircut 10%, whether you apply 15%, whether you do debt restructuring, or whether you do debt reprofiling, whether you do debt rescheduling, whether you do the market-to-market valuation, they all have cost, and it will affect the people's funds. And it's going to, next year, banking, like what government was saying yesterday, they were thinking about liquidity support. Yes, they have to think about liquidity support because some banks are going to have a serious liquidity support. And more importantly, if you apply the IFRS in the debt valuation, then some are even going to have capital losses, and there will be capital adequacy challenges in the years ahead. So the banking field for the next year and the years to come doesn't look, to me, where I'm sitting, it doesn't look very good at all. It doesn't look very good at all.
So the banking landscape doesn't look like things are going to be good. And you've mentioned that whether it's restructuring, reprofiling, rescheduling, we're going to encounter some pain, a lot of pain in the year to come. What picture then does it paint? Because listening to Deputy Finance Minister Dr. John Kumah speak to us right here about what Eurobond holders could be facing, we're looking at a 30% haircut. And in 2023, nothing by way of returns. In 2024, 5%. In 2025, 10%. Before, in 2026, 4 years after, they'll go back to normalcy. I've had interactions with some people who had so much, and on the back of, in recent times, they are seeing their profits, their principal, the profits completely taken off per reports that we are getting. T-bills are exempt, but what does this mean for investors?
Well, if you see, in the debt treatment, there's what we call equitable and fairly treatment. Every debtor, creditor has the right to be treated equally. So if you go and project that Eurobond would cut 30%, if you don't take care, they're going to tell you that what is good for geese is good for gander. So why don't you do 30% on your side, the domestic? And if you do, even from where I'm sitting, even 15%, if I started talking the figures to you, which I've done the MPV values of all the debts to the bondholders, it is not pleasant. So I don't know why somebody is telling somebody that somebody can do 30%, because the other creditors are going to say the same thing. Even though inflation has already whittled down the domestic bond, what we should take care of this. Inflation has whittled down the domestic bonds. The values have gone down. So if you go and make mention of 10% to Eurobond, and they also decide that what is good for you is good for us, then let's do 30. We're not going to have it easy at all. That is why I say that in the debt treatment, there must be equitable and fairness, and there be transparency. What is good for domestic debtors must be good for the foreign debtors. So people talking like that, they should sit down and work the figures. You know, if you haven't, everybody talks narratively, but if you sit where I'm sitting and the figures I have in front of me, if I were to be mentioning the figures to you, you begin to ask me, hey, this is a serious matter. You see, we should attach seriousness to this debt scratching. Now people are talking debt swap. Debt swap is a very simple thing. What is saying that? Extend your maturity period, reduce your coupon rate. And they all have implication on the banking sector. After all, the banks are holding about 31% of the bond. Foreign firms and institutions are holding about 26%. Bank of Ghana is holding 10%. Rural Bank is holding point-something percent. I can tell you off head, all these people, and they're all going to have part on the people's funds. And if you have people's funds, the banks could not. That's why Governor yesterday was citing us, saying that there's going to be challenges in the banking sector. Capital, some banks' capital are going to be whittled down. We're going to have liquidity, and we may provide liquidity support. All these things are the impending issues that we need as a nation to address, because 2023, from what I have read and what I have heard, is not going to be easy for the poor and the vulnerable. We're going to have a serious challenge in the years ahead.
2023 is not going to be easy for the poor and the vulnerable. Does it only complicate the problem when you look at the fact that, listening to the governor of the Bank of Ghana recently, he also says that the policy rate is going up to 27%. But on the other hand, we've been told that inflation is projected to drop to 25% in 2023. We are looking at 40.4% now. And Vice President Dr. Bawumia says the economy will soon bounce back. Are these realistic?
Well, I don't know which variables they are holding on for them to be professing that positivity in the system. But if you look at this debt restructuring,
in fact, to quote the Daily Guide,
the policy rate was originally set 8% plus minus 2. Currently, I don't know is it 27 plus or minus 2. Before you can bring it to the original position, it's not going to be easy. Most who take money from banks are going to pay very high, especially when people are saying the inflation is. When people say inflation will come to 25%, fine, it's a projection. But the reality is that nobody controls the other side. We have what we call the cost push inflation, imported inflation. Depreciation is having its own way, and then cost of goods being imported is having its own way. So if you set a target that is going to come to 20%, are you controlling the variables that is beyond Ghana? Because we import a lot, and the currency has depreciated over, they say it's about 54%, but if you check critically from Bloomberg, it's more than 60%. So with inflation and depreciation and looking at the policy rate, it doesn't look good next year. Somebody tells you that it's going to come, the policy is going to come to about 22, fine. I don't know what variables he's holding on. The variables that I'm thinking of, that we have these Russian crude oil issues and the Ukraine war and the cedi depreciating again because of the cut from the Eurobond market where we cannot borrow to shore the cedi. What are we going to do to shore the cedi? The cedi currently, for me, if you ask me, the cedi was propped up all these 5 years. Now it is really showing its own value, that this is the value it should have been. Because if you cannot borrow from the offshore to shore the currency,
when you say
the currency comes out clearly.
When you say the cedi was propped up, do you imply that we were artificially stabilizing the cedi and now we've seen our true level?
Well, what we've seen is a temporary stopgap. The cocoa money came in and is being able to mitigate it. What about cocoa money exhaust before December? What are you going to do? You see, currency, for me, currency is about supply and demand. We don't have the supply, but we have the demand. That is what the equation. The supply is the goods we sell outside and we get a foreign exchange. Unfortunately, apart from cocoa and a piece of gold and a limited oil, we don't have anything to show. Because that is why in the budget, I now realize what we've been saying, that the country was structurally imbalanced. Now they are now thinking that, why don't we do domestication? And we should have done domestication even since 2011, 2008. If we have done domestication like what domesticated philosopher theory said, the other man said, we would not have a situation like this. Because everybody is talking about demand of the foreign currency. Nobody is talking about the supply. But if you don't supply, you cannot give. You don't give what you don't have. Nemo that non-con abet. No one claims what he hasn't bought. The cedi, the dollar is not there. The euro is not there. The pound sterling is not there. So if you claim and it's not there, it is not there. What we should do, that's why I find it good in the budget, we are now beginning to realize that we need to domesticate our economy. Produce more rice, poultry. If we do that, I've said this over and over again. We spent, yesterday I read somewhere, the rice importation is about 1.5 billion. It is even bigger than cocoa syndication recently. Why? Why can't we produce enough of rice or maize? Because if you go to Zimbabwe, it is called sasa. Sasa is the main food, maize. You produce it, they don't have more rice, they have more maize. And we can be eating kenke, dokno, banku, but unfortunately, we decided to have a foreign taste. So what I saw in the budget, which I give them I take my hat off is for now realization that we need to domesticate our economy, structurally balance the economy by planting, by growing what we eat and producing what we eat so that the currency will find its level. Other than that, all the things we've said will never happen. But this is the first time I'm still in the budget. And I take my hat for the minister for at least the positive thinking that a time has come for us to domesticate. If we domesticate, hardship will come now. But I can assure you, by the next 3 years, Ghana will be a net exporter of maize and rice. And we won't have this challenge. So for me, that is a positive for the minister. And I commend him for that. And I hope he will take it in good faith. As he takes the commendation in good faith, he must also take the critique in good faith.
Right. Before I let go of you, I would just, and maybe sharing these thoughts. I don't know about the consumption of rice being a foreign taste or acquired taste, because for rice, we've always consumed it on the continent, but maybe production levels here, because we have the capacity in Ghana. It's just that we've not made use of that capacity. And maybe, on the other hand, we can talk about the foreign taste when it comes to the rice produced in Vietnam and the rest, instead of focusing on our locally produced rice, which we can consume. But my final bits to you. What are your expectations then in terms of securing an IMF deal? Then there is talk of the gold for oil situation. How feasible is that for you? Quick reactions to that, and we can move on.
I think from the literature, if you're able to put the debt sustainability on ground, putting what will make the debt sustainable by restructuring, I'm not sure IMF will scare you off. They will possibly want to help you. Because, you see, don't forget, there is something Ghanaians have forgotten. Let me tell you this. Ghana has been the stable economy in the whole of sub-region. And the IMF, from what I hear, is they want to support us so that we don't have another problems than other countries. So if you can get the debt sustainability on good level, they will be prepared to support it. But let me chip in before I go. You know, when I was a child, my mother, a village woman, used to hire trucks to carry tomatoes to Burkina Faso. I'm talking about 1960 when I was 68, 69, and 67. My mother was a farmer who buy tomatoes from Ashanti region and take it to Burkina Faso. What do we see now? We now import onions and tomatoes. Why? If we create the enabling environment, giving the various facilities, the value chain system to farming, my brother, Ghanaians are hardworking. Ghanaians are tough. Ghanaians are good. We'll be able to do it. So let us not take it from Ghanaians. Let us all come together as a nation and brace ourselves for the challenges ahead. I'm sure by 2025, 2026, we will not be talking about the debt. We'll be talking about a growing economy. So that is all that I will say this morning. Thank you.
Dr. Atuahene, we're grateful for your time. Thank you so much for having joined us on that beat. Later on, we'll be getting some scope as well in these economic times about how you can actually make the most of investments. But let me come into the studio. Boakye Danquah is here looking resplendent. A very good morning to you once more.
Very good morning to you, Ben, and to your viewers.
I would ask what your takeaways are from what Dr. Atuahene has been sharing, with us. It's a gloomy picture he paints. He talks about the fact that, look, whether it's debt restructuring, debt reprofiling, debt rescheduling, debt swapping, whatever it is, we are in dire straits. And if you look at the fact that our cocoa syndicated loan, per what he says, is even getting for us less than we're spending in terms of our import bill on rice, then you notice that we are in a very sticky situation. I know you'd probably have some reactions for him before we get into other matters.
Well, yeah, Ben. So I think that my positive reactions are that the learned doctor has painted the stark reality that the Ghanaian economy is in, which is why for us as a government, we have aided in the presentation of the budget to ensure that we have a united front and also be able to have homegrown solutions that will be able to address the very teething challenges. So I can't sway away very much from I can't sway away very much from the very learned doctor and his inputs this morning as it relates to the Ghanaian economy. But I'm very certain that his commendation of our government and of the finance minister in trying to take the bull by the horn in addressing these issues domestically and ensuring that we have some very good restructuring as it relates to our debt, we should be able to come out of the woes. But it's a very challenging time for our government, it's a very challenging time for governments around the world. But clearly countries and leaders are beginning to see that it's important that you are self-reliant on your own economy, that you eat what you grow, that you make sure that you don't overly rely on export, that you are able to, yes, you don't overly rely on importation, but you're able to export things from your country to be able to ensure that your cedi or your currency grows stronger and stronger. So it's a very challenging time, but we are very certain that we'll be able to address the very teething challenges.
Look, it's one thing saying these things. It's another thing altogether being realistically putting your shoulder to the wheel and doing stuff. Yes, the president has said a few things. Yes, we've heard that Forex to people who are importing things that we can have substitutes for will not be given, you know, that Forex and all of that. But one thing that a lot of people point to, and if it were working as it should, is 1T1F and what we have to show. Recently, and I'll go back to what Nana Kumia said, these factories, when we investigate, we find out that a lot of them are not, they are suffering. I think you were on the show the other time when we spoke to one of them who actually mentioned
when you
that.
Raised the issue. But I think
we interacted with someone who actually painted a picture for us.
I think that let's not sway away from the issues. As a country, we have a collective agenda to make sure that our country works, regardless of who is in power.
Is 1D1F working?
Absolutely. I think that there's not been.
So if it is, why is it not helping with our import bill? It's not added anything, taken away anything from our import bill.
Prior to the MPP government coming into power, there wasn't such a high drive for industrialization in country.
There wasn't?
Well, I do not think that there existed anything called one district, one factory. I do not think that there existed a dream and a vision to build close to about 250.
I guess the question is, what's in the name?
No, I don't think so. And so if you look at the number of industries that we have built, clearly you would be able to say that it's a commitment to start the industrialization process. No government has sought to do that. And you are aware that...
No government?
As far as I'm concerned...
At least we know the very first government in our first republic did that, and we ended up destroying everything. You know the history.
You're talking about something that happened
even in the fourth
50
republic.
years ago, 60 years ago.
I think every administration has done something in that respect. You've given it a name.
The drive and the emphasis that our government has given to industrialization is unparalleled in this country. And we must acknowledge and appreciate the inputs that we have put in as it relates to one district, one factory. I can understand and appreciate some of the very shortcomings in terms of the focus area of some of the things that these factories are into. But it doesn't take away the fact that our government has sought to start a conversation and start an infrastructural process of ensuring that the country comes on a platform of an industrialized state.
But Paul Grieve, just take a breather. How do you assess a policy based on results or the mere fact that the policy exists? No,
you assess this on a number of levels. I mean, yes, definitely the policy comes into being, the policy implementers and then the policy takers. I think that one district, one factory has been extremely successful. We've built a number of factories. You are aware of those factories, where they are. I've listed them every
some of them don't exist.
Every now and then. Where
some of those that your people don't exist, and they are producing nothing.
I want to focus on the factories that exist. I want to focus on the factories that the president has commissioned. I want to focus on the factories that the data is available. I want to focus on the factories that has created tens and thousands of jobs for the Ghanaian people. I want to focus on those factories. And I think that...
How exactly do we measure that?
Well, I mean,
the tens of thousands of jobs.
The impact of the factories, from the tiles to the bricks to the fruit juices to the water, to a number of these manufacturing factories that are there. You impact the measure on the output. You impact the measure on the employability. You impact the measure on the economy. And so clearly, you have a number of skills that you can use to be able to measure the impact. But we cannot take away.
If I asked you right now, how many people precisely 1D1F has created employment for, directly, not indirectly, directly? How many would you say? I mean, you can strike an average.
Well, on average, I think that is created over 60% of jobs in the market space.
Which would be equivalent to what?
Well, you want me to give you a specific number?
Yes.
I don't have the number readily, but I know that it's created tens and thousands. Some of the factories has created close to about 30,000 jobs. Some has created 100,000 jobs. I will be able to put together the
You mean there are factories, just one, that have created about 10,000?
Lots of factories. I will pull out the data.
Can you name one?
I will pull out the data. I can quickly pull out the data for you to have a look at it, and then we will be able to emphasize that. But I think that as a country, we have had a very particular focus, and in the particularity of our focus, we are addressing the needs and the challenges as it comes poco a poco. In the midst of
I like the Spanish you theory.
Yes, in the midst of that, the Ghanaian people clearly appreciate the support of government. I mean, you realize the doctor stated in the budget, one of the things that we sought to do is to aggressively really mobilize domestic revenue. And I mean, Benji, you will recall how it is very difficult to raise revenue. Look at how challenging it was for us to even pass the e-levy bill, which we have had to reduce to about 1% now, primarily because we realized that the digital economy had grown exponentially. I mean, you see how the digital economy had grown from about 76 million to close to about 1 trillion Ghana cedis as at date, and how people were doing businesses within those platforms, and see how government sought to ensure that in expanding the tax bracket, if people in the communities and villages would want light, electricity, school, hospitals, roads, we ensure that people contribute significantly to that. And so, I mean, if you look at a lot of these measures, it's important that we put it up. And as a poor, developing, middle-income country, you look at the leap. Look at how the video that we're watching, which has made me quite emotional this morning, because you realize that the Ghanaian people are suffering. You also realize that there are poor people in the country, which is why government is seeking to address those needs. Look, we're expanding our LEAP program. It's estimated that we are going to be increasing our LEAP program to close to about 344,000.
That's a good thing. No one contends that. But the very person, the very old man,
1.8 people in the country.
The very old man you're speaking of has also not received his LEAP payment since May. So those are some of that's the other side. I agree with you. What he gets, for him, that is his sustenance. That is everything for him, apart from what I think he mentioned, is it Seaview and people from a certain outfit assisting him. That is his sustenance. Now, even that, while being a good program, has been handicapped. You look at NAPCO and its handicaps. You look at even the National Service Scheme and their handicaps. So there are problems in there. But I think you're looking for the data that
yes,
because I'll hold you to that.
Absolutely.
I've not forgotten.
No, I've not forgotten as well.
So even as you check out the data, we're also looking at other aspects of what the budget says, and I would like to get your take on the VAT e-levy, conundrum that has come up. Dr. Etiahene shared his own thoughts on it. He feels it's going to lead to the poorest of the poor becoming even more impoverished, to fall even further into penury. But what exactly can be done in the coming year? Side by side with some of these other programs that we are implementing to alleviate the poverty in the system. I also made mention of the fact that lots of millions of Ghanaians, over 14 million, have fallen into multi-dimensional poverty. According to the World Bank, over 1 million have fallen into or fallen below the poverty line. So these are grave matters to grapple with. Recently, when we heard from National Security Minister Albert Kandapa, he made mention of the fact that we had over 2 million unemployed youth, citing the security threat that poses. Any quick reactions to that? Have you found the data yet?
Yes, I have. I found the data, but let's go ahead and then I'll come back to it.
Right.
So yes, clearly, you talk about unemployment. You talk about the threat of young people to our national security and the rising terror acts within the sub-region of West Africa. Every government has sought to successively address unemployment. You'll recall that in our government, one of the goals that we seek to do in addressing unemployment is to ensure that we put the country on a large scale of entrepreneurship. Which is why we brought the Youth Start initiative, that young persons under the age of 40 and at 40 can be able to go in for some grants and request for some monies for some business projects that they might be interested in particularly. We launched that, we're pumping in close to about $10 billion in that regard under the two agencies of Ghana Enterprise Agencies and NEIP. So that is our way of tackling unemployment, I mean, in that regard. And I think that we need to encourage the young people who have business proposals, who have some ideas in mind to want to take advantage of this opportunity. We do appreciate that it's not everyone that can be an entrepreneur, but we appreciate that a few that can be entrepreneurs can start very good businesses and then employ other people to come on board on that. I come to the one district, one factory. I mean, I found my data. I'll go through it. You know, there is the data I have here. Sun Harvest Juice Factory. They produce fruit juice. They have number of employed people is about 5,200. Direct is 200. Indirect is about 5,000. I have data here for
so I missed that. Can you just repeat?
Okay. So what I said was the Sun Harvest Juice Factory. They are in the eastern region. They have created close to about 5,200 jobs.
That is direct jobs.
Direct jobs, yes. If you look at Happy Sunshine Company, they are into manufacturing of canned tomato. They have created close to about 5,100 direct jobs.
Where are they?
They are in Suhum, down the road over there.
5,000 jobs.
5,100 jobs.
5,100 jobs.
There is the Innovation Manufacturing Group. They manufacture biscuits and confectionery related products. They are in Pong, created close to about 1,130 jobs. I can send this data to you. I mean, there's a lot more of jobs that have been created. I mean, I just think that there is the integrated compost and recycling plant. They recycle waste into compost. In Accra here, created close to about 4,000 jobs. So you look at a number of these one district, one factories. I think that the goal is not to discredit government efforts, really, in trying to industrialize the Ghanaian economy and setting up factories. I think that the goal and the drive is that something has begun. It's not where we expect it to be, but we would definitely achieve our goals before our tenure comes to an end. And there's a lot of data that I have readily available. There's the Sanda Ghana Diapers Limited. They import, they do production of diapers and sanitary napkins. They've created close to about 1,450 jobs. So you look at a lot of these jobs that have been created. You can't discredit that. You look at Bibiani Lodging Limited. They do wood, manufacture wood. They're in Kumasi, created close to about 1,100 direct jobs, and a lot. And if you look at the number of factories, I think that the data shows that.
I think you've just given quite a bit of work to our correspondents in the different regions.
Absolutely,
we're going to check these out.
Please
check them out in terms of
please do
the factories being actually available. People actually working there, the numbers we're looking at, and hopefully they don't turn out to be like Nana Kumia put out Wale Savelugu, and we went there and found rodents and lizards and incomplete and abundant.
I think you should focus
buildings.
on what I'm saying.
We shall check
emphasis
some
on
of
the
these
good results.
And of course, look at what happens from there. There's also this latest development, of course, in shoring up our local currency, the gold for oil situation. I don't know whether you followed the discourse in terms of what the challenges are. The community miners have come to the studio. Dr. Blessing Aka was here yesterday. Dr. Kone of the Chamber of Mines. All of them have expressed their concerns about the metrics or the optics of it so far. Can you give us further insight into that?
You know, Ben, we are in very difficult times where we need to find measures to be able to address our very teething challenges as it relates to the rise of fuel. I mean, everything rises and falls on fuel because, I mean, food will go high because people are transporting that, inflation will go high. I mean, a number of factors. So what we seek to do is to get the Bank of Ghana to buy gold and store it up in the vault, and in the midst of that, trade that for our oil in other countries. That is going to help us really just minimize the number of monies that the OMCs and BDCs need to exchange to go and buy the gold, the oil, which is the fuel, and then bring it back into the country. So,
quick questions.
Yeah.
So the underlying bits, I think we all understand what you've told us so far. But how are you going to go that route? Government is not directly bringing in, this crude or this oil. We've moved away from that. It's been a long time since we did that. We've moved away. How are you going to, bring that to bear with the oil marketing companies or the bulk distribution companies? And are you also taking stock of the fact that the price of gold fluctuates, and at some time, the price of gold versus the price of oil could be problematic? It's not static. People have raised red flags about these two situations. I just want to make it very basic.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you view these?
I understand that. Benjamin, every single country and government must always look out for their unique selling proposition, which is, as a country and as a government, we have some unique selling propositions, and one of them becomes our gold reserves. And the more gold reserves we have, the better we are as a country. Because then when the gold prices go very high and the oil prices go very low, then you can be able to get some oil and fuel coming into your country. So one of the things that we seek to do is to have a broader conversation with the AMCs and the BDCs for them to understand that when you need to change your Ghana cedi to Forex to go and buy your oil and bring it to the country and sell, it impacts every single thing. It impacts our Ghanaian currency, it impacts the price of fuel. So one of government's measures of stepping in to really help the entire situation is ensure that government has that liquidating ability, which is the gold that we have bought and stored up in the Bank of Ghana vault, and then we take that to any of these producing countries of oil, so we can be able to get that into the country. So those are the rationales behind, but it's a broader conversation that we'll have with the BDCs and the OMCs for them to come to an appreciable understanding for all of them to join this kind of policy that government is putting in place.
Tied to that, interestingly, so the World Bank is expressing concerns about Ghana's increasing reliance on its natural resources. And again, we're falling on those natural resources when it comes to securing oil. Don't you think, especially when you think of future generations and the fact that these resources are finite, and you even consider, because for many years, we would even say that this is our output globally when it comes to gold production. And India alone would tell you that, what we got from Ghana was this much. The United Arab Emirates would tell us, it appears we're not doing justice to ourselves and we're not being fair to posterity on it, are we?
Benjamin, the natural resources might not necessarily be finite. Yes, natural resources.
Our gold is very finite.
Well, the more...
Our diamond is very finite.
But we've been mining gold in this country for a very long time.
Have you followed the trajectory of projections when it comes to how long we're going to have gold?
And then we are not going to have gold anymore.
And it's going to be practically...
It's going to be finished.
Yes.
Well,
have you followed those projections?
I've followed the projections. I've read the papers. I've seen those trajectories and everything. As we speak now,
right.
we still have some more gold in the country. We still have some more.
It doesn't mean we should deplete it.
No, not at all. That's not the goal. No, that's not the goal.
Engage in consumerism because there are generations to come, and we owe them a responsibility to ensure that they will also have a share of
Benjamin, I agree. I'm part of that generation.
Well, you are here at least. There are the yet unborn.
I'm part of that generation that is yet to come. Into various arms of government and leadership. But clearly, yes, I do appreciate that government falling on natural resources is key for development, which is why I say that every single country has a unique selling proposition. You need to be able to see what unique resources that you have available that you can be able to use to trade. And I'm certain that we are keeping in mind the data that is available as it relates to the finite nature, as you describe it, of our natural resources. But I'm very certain that within the space that we have available, especially with the situation that we find ourselves in, the gold for oil is, and other policies that we have put in place is one of the pragmatic policies to ensure that we're able to come out of the woes.
So to wrap the conversation, Palgrave, it is clear, unless you do not agree with Dr. Atuahene, who spoke to us earlier, that next year is going to be a tough year. We still don't know too much about our IMF program. I don't know when we'll have a staff level agreement on the program. In the meantime, depreciation of our currency, though technically we say 54%, like Dr. Atuahene hinted at, Bloomberg and the rest will point to the fact that we are actually over 60%. Inflation per what we have here, what the Ghana Statistical Service tells us, is pegged at 40.4%. And for those of you who don't know how to go about it, what you need to do if you want to know how inflation on the general level, because your inflation could be higher than the national average, you just look at 40.4 divided by 100 and multiply it by your salary, and you will know exactly how much inflation alone is taking out. When you look at all of these dynamics and the fact that the vice president tells us in the Daily Guide newspaper, expect economic recovery soon. What is reality? What is fact? What is fiction? And how do we do that with this 30% haircut we're looking at that is staring us in the face? Maybe you can wrap on those.
So Benjamin, I mean, clearly in trying to bring conclusion to a number of our economic challenges and how government is addressing that, we would reach an IMF staff agreement very soon. The president, in his economic address to the country, stated that by close of year we should reach an IMF staff agreement. And so we are very certain that we'll reach an IMF staff agreement. Having the finance minister present the budget for 2023, it's a clear indication that we are at the very close edges of reaching our negotiation and coming to a close. Yes, the economy definitely is going to bounce back. We are going to have some very difficult and challenging years ahead of us, which is already known to government as well. But we are making sure that in the midst of the challenges that the entire globe is facing, I mean, Ghana definitely not being in isolation of the impact of the global challenges, we're going to make sure that the Ghanaian people don't necessarily experience those hardships as it is, which is why a number of these measures have been put in place. If you look at the austerity measures that we have put in place, close to about 7 of them, it's very key. I'll list them: aggressively mobilize domestic revenue where people can pay their taxes and make sure that we have enough revenue in the country, streamline and rationalize expenditures from government angle. You are aware, I told you how we've cut down our expenditure and it's even extended into 2023, boost local productive capacity, where the Bank of Ghana has now stated that it's not going to be giving forex for the importation of rice, vegetable oil, toothpaste, pasta, and all of those other things. Promote and diversify exports from our country, and protect the poor and the vulnerable, which is why LEAP is very key for us as a government. Expand the digital and climate responsive fiscal infrastructure, and then implement a structural and public sector reforms. I believe that once all of these things are put in place, we should have a very good year from 2024 into 2025.
Well, so soon may not be too soon, in fact. But thank you for joining us on the program. Dr. Richmond Atuahene is a banking consultant. He joined us earlier to share his thoughts, and he was saying that we should brace ourselves because next year is going to be very, very, very tough, especially for the poor. Also in the studio joining me, Palgrave Boakye Danquah. He is government's spokesperson on governance and security.